Hey guys, my name is Nick Chanuchis, and today I'm going to be presenting my talk, Introduction to Hiking and Climbing Colorado's 14ers. So I started giving this talk in 2015, and every year I've gone down to the local outdoor stores. I usually present at Bentgate Mountaineering here in Golden, where I live. Also go up to Neptune Mountaineering up in Boulder and down to the Mountain Chalet down in Colorado Springs, and I give my presentation. We usually have 40 to 50 people show up. And this year, because of COVID, I've been forced to do all my presentations online. And I thought I would go ahead and just record one to load up to YouTube so that anybody could watch it anytime. So this is my presentation. During this year especially, we're spending a lot of time at home, buying a lot of things online. And this is a great opportunity to buy from these local outdoor stores in the Colorado Front Range or wherever you live. So today we're going to start off with a really quick overview of COVID, how that's affecting Colorado and the mountains. Then we're going to go through the terminology of 14ers. We're going to break down the steps to plan your hike. We're going to talk about what to bring. We're going to talk about what to do if you get into trouble. And then we're going to wrap up with some leave no trace etiquette. So this is summer of 2020, and the world is a very different place. You know, if you're watching this a couple years in the future, hopefully things are much better, because right now it's been really, really strange. So there's a lot of questions that have surfaced. We were in total shutdown mode in Colorado back in March. Now things have started opening up over the summer. Most trailheads are open. You can get out and hike. But it's been a really, really strange year. So the first thing to note is that Colorado went under a safer at home notice back in April. It's now August when I'm recording this, and we are still under a safer at home order. But it's very basic stuff. You know, stay home if you're sick. Don't be in big groups. Try to stay away from people as much as you can. We are actually under a statewide mask mandate right now, so everybody's required to wear masks when in public or around other people. And then this bottom one here, when possible, avoid using grocery stores, gas stations in small towns. So what's happened is a lot of the smaller communities, especially early on in the pandemic, were kind of limited with supplies, and if a bunch of people from the Front Range come in, buy up all their hand sanitizer and toilet paper, it's not good for them. So it's always a good idea before you leave home to make sure you got a full tank of gas and just kind of be prepared for whatever you might come into. So right now this summer, travel and recreation are open. There are currently no peaks that are closed entirely because of COVID. However, the road up Mount Evans is no longer drivable, but you can ride your bikes up it. And also the train is not going in the Chicago Basin this year. There's 4 14ers in Chicago Basin. Normally you take the train between Durango and Silverton, the backpack in there. And so the train's not running this year into Chicago Basin. Everything else is open as of right now. One of the other issues that we're having is people are doing a good job staying away from each other, but at the same time, we need to be careful to protect our trails and stay on the trails. And so what's happening is in a lot of areas where there's a lot of traffic, people are stepping off the trail and walking past each other, which is good for social distancing, but it's bad for maintaining trails and starting to destroy the tundra. So we need the follow leave no trace. We need to stay on the trails, do the best that you can getting around people. I highly recommend that every time you go out hiking is that you wear a neck gaiter or a buff. And then whenever you pass somebody, you can just pull it up, cover your face, walk past them, drop it down, you're good to go. I was on Mount Bierstadt a couple weeks ago, and I would say 30% of people are doing that, which is great. Hopefully more people will continue to do that. And it's also not a bad idea. I've started wearing a buff most days when I'm just out and about, because you never know when you might need to run into a gas station or a store that you weren't expecting to go into. Normally when we start this talk, I recommend some beginner 14ers like Bierstadt, Quandary, etc. And the problem is so many people are on those peaks that you're going to walk past hundreds of people, especially on a weekend. So you need to be prepared for that. And if you're in a high risk category, you know, it might be a good idea just to wait until next year. So the bottom line is whatever happens, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's closures, whether it's fires like we're currently having, you need to just kind of be prepared for anything. And that includes, you know, a lot of the small towns, their businesses are open, the restaurants are open. It's good to support local restaurants. But a lot of restaurants are also closing for lunch and only opening for dinner and that kind of thing. So just be prepared for anything when you go out. This is a graph of our current COVID cases. You know what? Oh, sorry. This is an updated graph of our current COVID cases. Today is August 21st. And as you can see, this is the number of cases in the state of Colorado in the blue. This is our number of deaths. This is our number of hospitalizations as of current as of today. And what we had was back in March when we shut everything down and into April, we had a spike in cases, obviously, as the whole country did. Then during the shutdown, things got better. Then when we started to open things up, things started to get bad again. There was a mask mandate put in place by the governor. Things are starting to get better again as we're kind of at the end of summer, not getting as many tourists. Everybody's moving mass. So right now we're kind of in a good trend. You know, back here early on, testing wasn't really available, so these numbers were actually not a lot higher. Right now, testing is available. And at the moment, we're trending in a good direction. Hospitalizations are down, which is great because we're doing better at treating the virus. So the reason I just show you all this is if you're planning a trip or you're going to come out to Colorado, it's a good idea to kind of check these numbers just to see, you know, if we're in a downward trend or we're stabilized, everything's going to be open. If we start to see a big spike or a second wave or something, things could start to close down again. Hopefully that doesn't have to happen. All right, so that's enough for COVID. This is the normal portion of the 14er hike or a 14er talk, and let's get started. So this is me. I moved to Colorado in 2007, and I went out and hiked my very first 14er at the end of that summer. I had no idea what I was getting into. I knew very little about 14ers, but I got to the summit. I was really excited about it, and I had a really great time. And since then, in the following decade, I've gotten out and I've gotten to do a lot of really fun things in the mountains, including, you know, climbing peaks in winter, finishing the 14ers, doing some trail building, doing some skiing, meeting a lot of great friends, and having a really fun time. And so one of the things I think about this guy here at the very beginning. If I could go back in time and I could give him some advice, you know, what were the things that I've learned over this time that would have helped this guy make some better decisions and maybe do a little better. So let's get started here. So this talk is geared for people who have maybe are looking to do their first 14er, or maybe you've done about a dozen, or maybe you've done 20, 25, 30, and you're looking to get in the harder stuff. It's kind of geared more towards beginners, people just getting into it, or people who have done a few peaks trying to get into more intermediate peaks. So let's start at the very beginning. What is a 14er? A 14er is a mountain that's higher than 14,000 feet, right? And less than 15,000 feet tall. In the same way, a 13er is a peak that's between 13,000 and 14,000 feet. Now, the highest peak in Colorado is Mount Elbert. It's 14,433 feet tall. And so basically, we don't have any peaks that are higher than that in the state of Colorado. And one other note is this is the correct spelling or this is the correct spelling. Sometimes people will put an N in there, like a 14er, and sometimes people will try to say 14er. Don't do that. This is the correct spelling. If you see people doing this, I wouldn't trust them. They probably don't know what they're talking about. All right, so how many 14ers are there in Colorado? Well, the answer is 53 or 54 or 58. They're all correct. And I know what you're thinking, right? You're thinking, man, this guy's hit his head a couple too many times. He doesn't math very well. Well, here's what's going on, okay? So the U.S. Geological Survey, the premier science organization in the United States, has determined that what they consider between the difference between one mountain and another is that the point between the lowest point in the saddle and the shortest peak has to be greater than 300 feet. And according to that definition, there are 53 mountains in the state of Colorado. Now, people are like, wait a minute. What about the Maroon Bells, right? Which only has 234 feet of relief between the saddle and the top of North Maroon, right? Technically, by USGS standards, North Maroon and South Maroon are the same mountain. But that would be bad for tourism because then no one would come to see the Maroon Bell. They all come here to see the Maroon Bells. This over here, by the way, is the Maroon Bells. This is Maroon Lake. Everybody has seen this photo. I grew up in Texas. I had this photo hanging on my wall in college. Everybody goes here, stands in the exact same place, takes the exact same photo, and it's awesome, and it's worth doing. I recommend it. So there are a handful of peaks, North Maroon here, El Diente, Conundrum, that don't quite have 300 feet of prominence, but they're epic enough mountains that they get included as their own 14ers despite this difference. So when you count it by that way, there's 58 peaks. And so for the rest of this talk, I'm going to refer to the 14ers as being 58 peaks. But it's just important to know that if some hipster out there tells you there's only 53 or 54, he's technically not wrong. All right, so here's where all the 14ers are located. I am right here in my home in Golden, Colorado. Most of them are, this is the, let me go back here. Here's our mountain ranges. We have 6 14ers in the Front Range, 15 out in the Swatch that runs from Leadville all the way down to Salida. Out in the San Juans around Durango, we have 14. The Elk Mountains are at, excuse me, out near Aspen, and so forth. In addition to our 58 14ers, we also have 764 13ers. And as you'll notice, they surround just about all the 14ers. So if you're tired of hanging out with a bunch of people on top of a 14er, usually right next door is a bunch of 13ers that nobody is on. So it's just something to consider. 57 of the peaks are on public lands, which includes Forest Service. Rocky Mountain National Park has Long's Peak. Some are on BLM lands, some are in wilderness area. Only one of the peaks is privately owned. That's Culebra, way down here in the south. But the rest of them, Culebra costs $150 to pay to the owner to go hike. But the rest of these peaks are free because they're on public lands. And who do public lands belong to? Us. So get out there and hike and enjoy your public lands. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the class ratings of a 14er, okay? So the easiest class is Class 1. And this is a man-made trail that's been, people have come in with shovels, designed a whole trail, easy to walk on, easy to follow. That is Class 1. Here's a couple examples. When we get into Class 2, things can get more rocky. You can get, some pretty solid Class 2 routes, or you can get like some kind of, big gullies, or you can get some really nasty loose stuff as we see here on Mount Sneffels. Class 2 has a really wide range. It can be, pretty easy, or it can actually be pretty difficult, depending on what you're hiking on. When we get into Class 3, we start what is technically considered climbing. All right, this is when you usually do scrambling. You don't need ropes, but you got to put your hands down, hold on the terrain. There may be some steepness involved or some terrain. Anytime you see Class 3, you should be wearing a helmet. Any Class 3 peak, you got to be wearing a helmet to go out there. Otherwise, you could take a fall or have rock fall on you and get in a bad place. There are a couple Class 2 peaks where you might want to wear a helmet. I've worn a helmet on Sneffels going back here just because this gully here is really loose and nasty and rocks come rolling down. But by the time you get to class 3, you better be wearing a helmet. This is my favorite peak on the left. This is Wetterhorn. We have this really nice solid rock coming up right before the summit. This over here is Wilson Peak. It's the class 3 section on it. Now, most of these mountains, the hike in is going to be class 1 and class 2, but it gets rated by whatever the highest part of it is. So here on Wilson Peak, you know, you have maybe 7,500 feet of class 3 climbing. That makes it a class 3 route. But most of the route is going to be a lot easier than this. This is known as the crux of the route. And then a handful of the 14ers are class 4. This is when the pucker factor just kind of goes through the roof. On the left is the famous, this is the knife edge on Capitol Peak, considered to be the hardest 14er to climb in Colorado. And then on the right, this is the hourglass on Little Bear, also a very nasty, very hard climb. These are class 4 peaks. They're beyond kind of the scope of this talk, and there's only about 4 or 5 of them that the easiest route up is class 4. So, you know, when you get more advanced and get more experience, you may want to go climb these peaks, but we're not really going to focus on them too much more today. All right, so where do I start? Well, when we break down the difficulty of the peaks, we have 6 class 1 peaks here. This is where I recommend you start. If you're just getting in the 14ers and you want to do your very first one, I recommend getting out and hiking, you know, Grays and Torreys are a good first peak. Pikes Peak isn't bad. Mount Albert's a good one, a little bit longer. And then these are all the class 2 peaks, kind of the easier class 2s and the harder class 3s, 2s, excuse me. And this is all what I consider beginner hikes, you know, just a class 1 and easier class 2s. You'll notice that there's over 30 peaks that are kind of in this beginner category. So if you don't want to do the really hard stuff, you got plenty of mountains to climb, plenty of places to explore. When you start getting into the intermediate peaks, which is some of those hard class 2, and then some of the class 3s, this is some of the more challenging stuff like Longs, like Wilson Peak that I just showed you. And then when you want to get into the hard stuff, there's probably about a dozen peaks that are pretty hard class 3s, hard class 4s. And again, today we're going to focus on beginner and some of the intermediate stuff. A few other things to consider is the quality of the rock. So on the left, we have the Crestone conglomerate. This is what you find on Crestone Peak, Crestone Needle. This is a very solid, very fun rock to climb on. On the right, we have the Maroon Bells again. Look how loose and crumbly this is. This mountain is just crumbling and falling apart, and every step you take is loose and dangerous. Where over here, you can just kind of run around. Over here, you gotta be very careful where you step. So sometimes a class 3 peak on solid rock is gonna feel a lot safer than being on a really nasty class 2. So that's just something to keep in mind. Class rating isn't everything. All right, so we're gonna go over a couple other terms here. Tree line. So what you'll notice here is this is Wilson Peak. The photo's taken in the fall because the leaves are starting to change. And what you'll notice is we have all these aspen trees and these pines, and then they get to this point and there's no trees past it. What's that all about, right? Well, this is known as tree line, and it's basically the elevation on the mountain where conditions are too extreme in the winter for vegetation to grow. It ranges, it's a function of latitude. So in the southern part of Colorado, it's about 11,600 feet. In the northern part of Colorado, it's about 11,800. If you go up to Alaska, tree line's like 2,000 feet above sea level, okay? So it changes where you are according to latitude. Every hike you go on that's gonna be above 13 or 14,000 feet is gonna go above tree line. And this is important because when afternoon storms come in, you know, you're much safer being down here in the trees. I mean, you're safest being back at the car, but if you're gonna be out, you're much safer down in the trees than you are up here. You're really exposed to lightning. Now, Can you tell me what Wilson Peak is famous for? Right? The answer is it's on the Coors Light can. All right, you've seen Wilson Peak 1,000 times because it's on every Coors Light can. But you probably didn't recognize it. And I won't blame you because you probably don't drink Coors Light. You probably drink some better beer, right? You probably drink some good microbrew or something. And I got to be careful what I say because I do live in Golden and I can see the brewery out my window. So anyway, we're just going to move on from here. Okay, couple other things. Golly, tree line, talked about that. Going up ridges. We talked about saddles. That's how you get your 300 feet rule. This is K2, which is the 13er. This is Capitol Peak, which is the hardest 14er. You can see there's not 300 feet here, so they're considered technically to be, actually, I think K2 is its own 13er. Scratch that. We're going to keep going. All right. This is a cairn, or if you're from the South, maybe a kern. You know, up in Boulder, you might refer to this as art. But when you're out hiking, the purpose of this is kind of an indication of where to go on the trail. So a lot of times you get in the rocky areas, you can't really see where the trail is. People will build these little cairns, they'll just stack rocks on each other. It's an indication of where to go. It's important to remember that you don't know who actually built these, and you actually don't know, you know, what their intent was, which route they were on. So in general, a cairn is a good thing to follow. I follow cairns every time I go out, but you always want to be a little bit cautious to make sure that some guy who didn't know what they were doing built this cairn. All right, when you get to the summit, a lot of the peaks have USGS benchmarks, which will show the elevation. This is the one on Bierstadt. It was actually put in place in 1955, which is pretty cool. I'm going to say maybe a third of the peaks still have benchmarks on them. Half, 2/3 of them don't. So if you find a benchmark, you're on the summit. If you get to the summit and there's not a benchmark, don't freak out. It probably, you know, got eroded at some point in the back. Okay, so now we're going to talk about planning your hike. What to do when you get out and go for a hike. So this guy right here is Bill Middlebrook. All right, and Bill was a computer programmer. He started a company back in the late 90s. And right before the dot-com crash, he sold his business, cashed out, retired at the age of 30, and he moved to Colorado. And he lives in Breckenridge, and he does a lot of skiing. And in the summer, he likes to hike. And he was interested in photography when he first came to Colorado. So he started this website called 14ers.com as a way to share photos with people. Over time, 14ers.com grew. Bill started making route descriptions, then he started a forum, and today this is the #1 place for all the information that you need to hike and climb your 14ers. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over. Okay, let's go. Let me see here. Let's go back. All right, so I'm going to do a live demo of 14ers.com and show you how to plan your hike. So 14ers.com is pretty straightforward. All the peaks are over here on the left. You can log in. I am Mongoose on 14ers.com, if anybody knows me. So here's all the peaks. Let's start by planning a trip. Let's take a look at Mount Bierstadt. This was my very first 14er that I showed you the picture of in the beginning. So what Bill has done is he's taken all the information that you need to do this hike and he's put it in one place. He's made it really easy. So I'm going to click on routes, and here is Mount Bierstadt here. Over here is Mount Evans, which is another 14er. These are all the different routes. We're going to be taking a look at this B1 route here, okay? And what that means is up here, the stars mean these are the standard routes. So we're going to look at Bierstadt's west slopes. This is a great first hike if you're looking to get out. This mountain's about an hour west of Denver. Okay, so Bill has all the information here for us. It's a class 2 hike. The exposure's low, the route finding's not difficult. You're going to start at the Grinnell Pass trailhead. There's directions here to get to it. Your starting elevation is going to be 11,600 feet. The summit's 14,000 feet. This is important information. You're going to gain 2,800 feet over the course of 7 miles. So this is kind of what makes it an easier 14er, is that it's short, 7 miles round trip. It's only 2,800 feet. Most of your peaks are around 3,000 to 4,000 feet long. And then what Bill has done is he's written out a route description, and then he's taken a bunch of photos and kind of laid out where to go. So we can just kind of walk through this real quick. You know, here's the trail. You can see this is what a class 1 trail looks like. That's about as good as it gets. Creek crossing, all the way up to, there's the summit, a little bit of class 2, and there we are on the summit. So the next thing you want to look at, so Bill has, you know, all the photos in the route description. 14ers.com has an app which you can download all this on your phone and take it with you. It's also not a bad idea to print all this out and take it with you in paper form. I like to do that. I realize since a lot of us are working from home, you might not have access to a company printer right now. So the 14ers.com phone app will work as well. It's important that you can actually download all the photos on your phone when you're offline so that you don't need a signal. One of my favorite things is this profile function here. So what we've done is, here's the route, here's the profile. You can actually like look at the elevation as the little dude climbs up to the summit, kind of see what's happening. So that's kind of fun. People share photos. And then the last thing is the NOAA weather forecast. Let's see what's happening for tomorrow. Yes, we have smoke in the forecast. Welcome. This is 2020, you know, and it's the month of August. So the punishment of the month is going to be wildfires all over the state, and we have a lot of smoke. Our forecast for tomorrow, which is going to be Saturday, 20% chance of thunderstorms afternoon. You know, that's a good weather forecast. Later on, we're going to go into more detail about how to plan a weather forecast. But the basis is you want to basically, most of the time there's a chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon. You want to make sure and get up and get down before that happens. If it's going to be rainy all day, it's probably better to wait for another day and always start early. Okay, let's get back to 14ers.com. Some other things is there are peak conditions. And basically what happens is somebody who went and hiked the peak, we'll just pick one randomly. Let's look at San Luis. Somebody went up here in August, trail is completely clear, meaning there's no snow. Someone cut back the willows, so it's a lot easier. There's no standing water, blah, 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 blah. This is always good to check, especially in the spring, because it allows people to know, like, okay, there's a lot of snow on the trail, or they're doing trail work, or, you know, the road got washed out because something happened, or etc. Like, this is kind of your up-to-date what's happening on the peak. In addition, they have what's called trip reports. And a trip report is basically, it's like someone's story of a hike they did. So if you're planning a peak, you might go take a look at what someone else did. So I'll pick a random one here. This is, oh, it's Uno, Tony 1. It's basically someone tells a story that, like, hey, I woke up, I ate breakfast, we hiked to here, then we went to here, then, you know, then I took a nap and I went over here and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of some additional information. If you're looking at doing a peak, it's kind of fun to read, you know, what maybe some other people who are, you know, maybe in your experience level had to deal with. It's going to have like kind of a story, but may have additional information than just the route description, and so on. Let's see, what else we got? One of the cool things is that you can do your own 14er user checklist. And so every time you hike a peak, you can come in and you can update it, and you can keep track of what you've done. And then Bill has all of your stats here. It also keeps track of 13ers, 14ers, blah, blah, blah. So you can kind of keep a record of, like, what I do in mine is every time I climb, I put a date in here about, you know, what number it was, who I did it with, you know, what happened. You can see I've done like Quandary like 8 times. And I just have a record of who I was hanging out with and what we did that day. So that's pretty cool. What else? And then on the right, this is all the forum. So people ask questions about, can my Subaru make it to the trailhead? Should I take my dog on, a class 4 route, and all kind of questions like that. So it's a good way to, ask a question. It's also really good to search. All the forum topics are saved. So whatever your question is, it's probably been asked and probably been answered. So it's a good idea to go check, do a search. And if you can't find anything, certainly ask, or if it's a new question, ask, but it's probably already been answered by a bunch of people. Okay, so let's get back to, let's see here. Let's get back to my slides. All right, so got that. Okay, where's a good place to start? These are the 14ers that I recommend if you're looking to do your first one, or you want to take somebody, it's their first time out climbing. These are the ones that I recommend. Bierstadt was my first one. Grays and Tories, Quandary. Sherman's a great one to start on. You can also go do Democrat to Calibron. Here's the class rankings that we talked about for the hiking. But the other things you want to look at is the elevation gain. So one example is like, let's compare Quandary to Bierstadt. Quandary is a class 1, Bierstadt's a class 2, right? Quandary has 3,400 feet elevation, Bierstadt only has 2,800. So you're gonna hike 600 feet higher, gain 600 more feet. You're gonna gain 600 more feet during your hike if you hike Quandary. That's gonna make Quandary feel a little bit harder than Bierstadt, even though Quandary is class 1 all the way and Bierstadt has a little bit of class 2. So those are just the kind of things to think about. St. Louis Peak, class 1 the whole way, longer hike, big day, 1350, 13.5 miles, and 3,600 feet elevation gain. Now, if you've done a number of class 1 and class 2, and you want to start getting in the class 3 peaks, here's some great ones that I recommend. The Sawtooth Traverse from between Bierstadt and Evans, it's a great first class 3. Bill has a good route description on it. Long's Peak is a big day, but it has a great class 3 section. If you're willing to go all the way down in the Sangre de Crisco's, you can do the Kit Carson, the Challengers, Little Traverse, or Blanket Ellingwood, or my favorite peak, Wetterhorn Peak, is a class 3, the one I showed a picture of. These are good first class 3 peaks. The rock's solid. And it's not a huge section of class 3. It's just a little bit of class 3, but it's fun. Good way to get started. Okay, let's talk about what to bring on your hike. Skip that. So we have the 10 essentials. This stuff over here on the right, usually I show a video that kind of makes fun of this guy who's unprepared. I'll put that probably down in the comments at the end of it. So we're just going to skip that for the matter of time. So let's talk about what to bring. Well, the first thing you need is, navigation. Most people don't bring a compass and a map anymore, but you should definitely have a printout of your route description or, a GPS. My watch has a GPS, and I have one on my phone. Next thing you need is sun protection. So you're definitely going to want to do sunscreen and sunglasses, because when you get higher up in elevation, the sun is stronger and can do a lot more damage. Don't go without sunscreen. You go an hour or 2 without sunscreen, you will be burned. So make sure that you got plenty of that. All right, let's talk a little bit about clothing. So usually what I like to do is I start off with I kind of like a long sleeve synthetic moisture wicking shirt. That's where I'll start. And then on top of that, I might wear, just something kind of like this would probably be my regular shirt for the day. And then you can wear shorts or you can wear long pants, depending on what you feel comfortable with. In terms of shoes, tennis shoes are fine for the earlier peaks. If you start hiking every weekend, you're probably going to want to invest in some hiking boots or some running shoes. But when you're first starting, there's no reason to go out and spend $100 on a bunch of shoes. Tennis shoes will be just fine. Then what I like to do is have an insulating layer and like a Gore-Tex or a rain jacket. So this is just a kind of Primaloft that I'll wear. This is my insulating layer. And then, I don't know where my rain jacket is, but I'll put a rain jacket over that if I need to. So if I get caught in a storm, I have that. I have this for warmth. Usually in the morning, I'm going to start off wearing most of these clothes. As it gets warmer through the day, I might strip down. I may actually be down just my base layer, trying to keep the sun off me. I also always bring a ski cap and a pair of gloves. And the idea is that if something goes wrong and you have to be rescued or wait things out, you can just put on all these layers, right? So you put on all your clothes, your hat, and your gloves. And the idea is that you would be able to spend the night if you had to. You probably want to be comfortable, but you want to be alive. So that's kind of what I think about when we get going. Next up, first aid supplies. I have a little, this was a cool little first aid kit that got kind of banged up in my pack. One thing that I recommend doing is kind of start your own little medicine cabinet. I mean, your first aid pack or whatever. You basically just need some bandages, some tape. This has some gauze and some alcohol swabs and some gloves. You can kind of put together your own little pack with just Band-Aids and tape and gauze and whatever. I also recommend just taking a bag. I don't know if you can see this. And just grabbing some medicine. You know, when you go in the gas station and they have those little like pack of like 2 aspirin or 2 Tylenol, buy those and throw them in a pack. And what I recommend having is things like aspirin, ibuprofen. Benadryl is a good one. You never know if someone can get stung by a bee or have an allergic reaction. You could also Imodium if you have GI issues, which is about, the worst thing that can happen. And whatever else you might need. That's pretty much it for me. But you never know when you might come across somebody who's having a bad day, needs some Imodium or whatnot. What's next? Fire, usually a small lighter, waterproof matches. You're going to be spending a lot of your day above tree line where there's not really anything to light on fire. But in an emergency situation, if you drop below tree line, matches could help. We are under a stage 2 fire ban right now, so don't light anything on fire. But there are times when that might be useful. Number 7, the repair kit and the tools. That's kind of more for backpacking and whatnot. Food. You will burn a lot of calories when you're on the mountain. So it's really important that you're eating and you're hydrating the entire way up. As a good rule of thumb, I stop every hour, take a 5-minute break. I make sure I eat. I make sure I drink something. Because what happens is people start off on their hike and they'll be doing good. And an hour will go by and they'll be like, let's keep going. Another hour will go by and then they'll just bonk. And so you want to eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty. In terms of water, this is an Nalgene bottle. This is 1 liter of water. I usually drink between 2 and 3 of these. Some people don't like to carry a lot of water because 1 liter weighs about 2 pounds. You're always better off having more water. If it's going to be a shorter day, I'm going to go with 2 liters. If it's going to be a long day, I'm going to go with 3. If you have a group, you can kind of, maybe carry 1 extra liter of water for the people in the group. And then the last thing that I recommend is a emergency bivvy. This is kind of like a mix between a space blanket and a sleeping bag. And the idea is it's small. As you can see, it just fits my hand. Throw it in my pack. If something were to happen, like I were to break an ankle or I'm waiting for a rescue or I were to come across someone who was hurt, have that person put all their clothes on, climb into that thing, and you're going to be able, hopefully, to make it through the night. And then my backpack is just a day pack. I don't know how many liters this is. It's not real big. And it just fits all of that gear. let's see, was there anything else? Oh, the other one that I highly, highly recommend is a headlamp. You know, a lot of times when you're hiking early, you're starting before the sun comes up, so you're going to need a headlamp. But even on hikes that are during the day that you don't need one, it's a great idea to have one of these guys. They don't weigh hardly anything, and if you get stuck after dark, you can find your way down. Or an emergency situation, if you're trying to signal a helicopter or search and rescue to come find you, it's great to have one. So anyway, those are the, I think I've gone over everything, the 10 essentials. So let's talk a little bit about keys to staying safe when you're in the mountains. The first thing you want to do is you want to start early. How early? 6 a.m., 5 a.m., somewhere in there. There used to be a rule that said be off the summit by noon, okay? But then people were getting struck by lightning at noon. So now the rule is be off the summit by 10 a.m. But the earlier, the better. We talked a little bit about, you know, every hour stop, eat, take a drink. When you're estimating your hikes, I would, if you're starting out, I would estimate between doing 700 and 1,000 feet an hour. For me today, I estimate at about 1,000. If I look at a peak and it's going to be 3,800 feet elevation gain, I think, you know, it's probably going to take close to 4 hours to get up. The fastest I have ever gone was one time we did 1,200 feet an hour and we were booking it. But 1,000 is pretty steady. So when you're starting out, you know, 700, 800, it's a good way to estimate, and you'll figure it out as you go. We talked about eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty, select good partners. That becomes more important the more you climb. The harder the peak is, the more important your partner is. You know, if you're just getting out for an easier 14er, you know, partner selection's important, but it's not the same as like trusting your life to someone when you're hanging off of, you know, Capitol Peak. All right, let's talk next. One of the things that I recommend is there is an app called Gaia, Gaia, and it's a GPS app, and it's free. You download it from the Google or Apple store, and it allows you to navigate on your phone. So you can pull in all of the trail maps and all the, trying to say, the USGS topo maps. And what you can do is you can put your phone into airplane mode, and then you can go out and you can navigate. You can still use your GPS on your phone, even in airplane mode, and you can navigate on this. So this is a great tool to have. I highly recommend it. Go download it today. Well, I guess one thing I do want to say is, you know, our phones today are amazing and they can do everything. You know, your phone can have a route description on it, it can be your GPS, it can be your navigation, it's your camera, you know, it's your emergency call, it's everything. And then if you drop your phone and it shatters or it goes down a gully, you've kind of lost everything. So it's always good to try to have a backup. I also recommend some GPS devices. If you have a watch, like a separate watch, I have a Sunto watch. A lot of people really like the Garmin watches. That can help you track GPS as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are going to get you into trouble that you need to watch out for. So the first thing to notice is, you know, if you live here in Denver, right, you have friends come visit from Florida or someplace, and they get off the plane, and the first thing they say is like, I can't breathe here, right? And you kind of laugh at them a little bit. So what your friends are feeling here is, as you go higher up in elevation, the amount of oxygen in the air decreases, the oxygen level. So, you know, here in the Front Range in the Denver area, you know, what your friend is feeling coming from Florida to Front Range is they're losing 16, 18% of the oxygen that they would have if they were back in Florida, okay? When we go up the 14ers, that oxygen level goes down even more. So Mount Elbert, which is the highest peak, you're hanging out at around 62% of the oxygen level, roughly, that you would have down at sea level. That's significant. That means a third of the oxygen that you would be breathing in at the beach is not there, and we certainly feel that. Now, if you ever read Into Thin Air, where John Krakauer talks about Mount Everest and the death zone. That's all the way up here. When you get above 25,000 feet, the death zone is known as a place where there's so little oxygen in the air that your body can't heal itself, can't rejuvenate. And this is when people start taking oxygen up mountains. So we're way down here. We're a long way. We're only about half the elevation of what Mount Everest is. So we don't really have to worry. We don't need to carry oxygen and that kind of thing. But you're definitely going to feel it. When a third of your oxygen is taken away, you're going to feel that. So what's that going to feel like? Well, it's going to make everything a little bit harder. When you get to the top of a 14er, walking, feels like jogging. Jogging feels like running. Running isn't an option. You're going to feel it. You're going to be out of breath. Your muscles are going to be tired. And everybody at some point kind of deals with what's known as AMS, acute mountain sickness. All right. And most of the time it's mild. You may start off with a really mild headache, feel a little like a little buzz. If you start getting into more serious side effects like nauseous or vomiting, it's really important to go down. See, what happens is if you keep going up the mountain, these symptoms are going to get worse. If you go down the mountain, things are going to get better. And it's important to know that. So it's kind of something that you just need to monitor with yourself. If you've been out hiking for 4 hours and you're a couple hundred feet below the summit and you're just starting to get a mild headache, it might be perfectly reasonable to keep going up, get the summit, start going down. If you wake up in the morning, you're 45 minutes into your hike, you're only 500 feet above the car and you're throwing up, you definitely need to turn around. You need to go back and try it on a different day. For people who struggle with altitude sickness, there are some prescription medications. I don't know too much about them, but I do want to mention them. You can do some research online and talk to your doctor. When people go climb bigger peaks, like in the Himalayas, they usually take these kind of medications. But, it might be something that can help you in Colorado. I've heard of it helping people. So I just want to throw that out there. All right, let's talk about what happens when you get into trouble, okay? So these are some headlines, and if you look at if you follow Colorado newspapers, you will see these headlines every week all through the summer. Denver Post, rise in 14er deaths reflect the rise in climbers' fearless behaviors. Father and son rescued from 14er Quandary Peak. Remember, that's an easy one after cliffing out. They got off route. Aspen Times, one after the other, 2 14er rescues on Monday, and on and on and on. This is in the news all the time. Climbing 14ers overall is pretty safe, but every year we have somewhere between 6 and 12 people die in the mountains. 6 to 12 people die on the 14ers. Now, the number of people who hike is in the hundreds of thousands, so hiking itself is pretty safe, but these are some of the things that can get you into trouble. And that reality hit home for me back in 2012 when one of my friends, Rob Jansen, died in a rock slide between Snowmass Mountain and Hagerman Peak. And up to that point, I hadn't really kind of considered the reality of that happening and the impact that can happen. I guess all I want to say is, if something happens to you in the mountains or a partner or you lose somebody, that has a really big impact on everybody around them. And so, it's important that we live our lives and we follow our hearts and our dreams and we live our adventures. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to be safe and think about the people that are impacted by that as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that could get you into trouble. So since this is an introduction talk, I'm going to focus on the summer. We're going to look at the summer months. We got June, July, August, September. In June, there's a lot of snow that's left over, depending on the year. Now, some years, it might be a low snow season, and you can get out the routes are clear in early June. Some years there's snow all the way into July. One of the easiest ways to know is Arapahoe Basin likes to stay open as late as possible. Arapahoe Basin is a ski area in Summit County. So if people are skiing at A Basin on the 4th of July, there's probably a lot of snow on the peaks. If A Basin's already shut down back in June, you're probably good to hike. Kind of in June and July, you get this monsoon season. This is where we get all of our thunderstorms, and it's this typical trend of the morning will start off clear, during the day clouds will build, and the afternoon will be a thunderstorm for an hour, and then things will probably clear out by the evening. You want to be off of the peaks. This is when it's really important to start early. Later in the year, kind of when you get into August, September, you get these nice weather days. We get past monsoon season. You might have a clear forecast all day, but it is getting colder at night. And if a storm does come in, it can drop snow on the peaks. It can snow up high any month of the year, but it tends to start happening more in September. So things you want to watch out for, obviously lightning is a problem all year, but it's especially bad during monsoon season. You could always take a fall and hurt yourself, or you could get caught in rock fall or rock slide. Being basically rock fall is rocks coming down on you, usually from another climber. Rock slide is when what you're standing on lets loose. These problems become really big when you get off route. On the harder peaks, it's harder to figure out where you're at and how to stay on route. And when you get off route, these things become significant problems. And then now, new for 2020, we have a global pandemic to contend with. So it used to be that, I always say that the only thing that matters is at the end of the day, everybody makes it home safe. But now with this pandemic, it's like, well, you don't really know you're safe until maybe a week or two afterwards. But anyway, these are all the things we should be thinking about. So let's talk a little bit about each one. So each year they put out, this is a very complicated graph. I love this graph that talks about snow. This is the beginning of winter, or October, November, December. This is the amount of snow in the mountains, and then this is the snow melts off in June, July, and spring. Each color is a different year. So this is average. This is going to be an above average year. This is a below average year. So what you can do is you can kind of see, this is a graph that's done by Snowtel. You can start to see that, snow builds up. We are at our peak snowpack right about the beginning of April, and then depending on how hot it gets, things melts up. So when you get out and hike in June and July, I mean, you can see here in this yellow year, there was almost no snow. And in this blue year, which I think was 2019, the yellow was 2018. So these are 1 year apart. In 2018, boom, everything's good to go by June. In 2019, you don't get to that same point until July. So when you're hiking along and you see a snow path, this is on Mount Princeton in the middle of June. The mountain's mostly clear, but we have this big snow path. Whenever you see snow, I want you to think danger, be careful. Because what can happen here is you start hiking along and then all of a sudden you slip and then you start picking up speed and then the snow ends and you get dragged across these rocks. It's probably not going to kill you, but it's going to rip you up pretty bad. So one thing to consider is microspikes. They're kind of like a poor man's crampon. Or you can think of it as, how you put chains on your tires. They're like chains for your feet. You can put them on, you can walk across snow or ice, take them off, and keep going. And the other thing is check the forum. This is when peak conditions come in, especially in the spring. People will tell you, hey, there's a ton of snow, bring microspikes, or you don't need them, everything's fine. Starting back in the winter of 2018, 2019, we had these huge snowstorms. We had these huge avalanches that went across I-70. They shut down I-70. They also took out a ton of new trees. And so what's happening now is over the last year or two, the trails are starting to people are starting to cut away some of the trees, and the Colorado 14er Initiative, which is a nonprofit that takes care of the trails, is starting to clean up. But you can still encounter a lot of this avalanche debris in the summer. And here's another one on Missouri Mountain. This is all fresh trees that was taken out. It wasn't there the year before. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our weather forecast. We looked at Bierstadt a little earlier in the talk. So what's going to happen is when you click on that NOAA weather forecast, you can do a pinpoint forecast, and it's going to give you a little box. Bill has already set them all up if you follow the website, or if you just go to NOAA.gov, you can click and set it up. This is going to show you where we're at. This is also going to show you at what elevation these temperatures are at. So sometimes it'll estimate around 12,000, sometimes it'll be as high as 13,000, kind of keep that in mind. So here's our forecast for the week. And as I said, you know, this isn't live. This is a slide from an earlier talk. So anyway, like on this day, there was a 50% chance of showers and thunderstorms, mainly before, oh, that's tonight, I'm sorry. Showers and thunderstorms mainly between 1 and 5, so that's your afternoon. If you click on in the bottom right, they have what's known as the hourly forecast, and they get into a very cool graph that'll show you the next 48 hours. It's a little complicated, but I'll just run through it. The red here is the weather forecast. We're starting, here's 6 a.m., here's noon, here's the evening. Temperature is going to come up, going to be in the 50s. Here's the wind gust. Here's the sky, precipitation, sky cover. And then down here, this is what we want to look at. This is our chance of rain, going from chance to likely in the afternoon. You can see the morning looks good. And then this is our chance of lightning and thunder. When we look at these 2 days, we can see that rain becomes possible at 10 a.m. starting, you know, on the next day. And then the day after that, rain isn't really possible until noon. So what we want to look at here is this is our window. This is when we want to get out and hike. The forecast on this day is much better because there's not a chance of rain before noon. Not saying that it can't rain before noon, but it'd be very unlikely. So this would be a better day to hike than this day. You could still get out and hike, but you also want to start really, really early. So if we were planning a 6 a.m. start, I would push this back an hour, maybe even an hour and a half, just to try to summit, you know, try to be on the summit by 8 and be heading down and be getting back to the car by the time any of this is going to happen. You could start a little bit later over here because you have a longer window. This is a slide I stole from meteorologist Chris Tomer, and this shows us lightning flashes per day. So on the bottom here, January, February, March, this is April and May, starting in May, then June, we're in July and August, and then we're dropping down into September, and then we start kind of getting into the fall and winter. So what you can see is in fall and winter, there's almost no lightning strikes. There can still be lightning in winter, but it's very uncommon. You can see that on a day in July or August, we're exceeding 6,000 flashes of lightning across the state. Okay, so this is when our monsoon season is happening. Now, if we were to break down in each of those days, when is the lightning occurring? So this is a graph for the state of Colorado. Again, this is another Chris Tomer graph that I stole. He looked at 38 years of data from 1980 to 2018. 263 casualties in the state of Colorado. Now, these are anywhere in the state, so they can be golf courses, they can be mountains, they can be anything. Look how many people have died before 9 a.m. 3, 10 a.m. and 11, and then boom, what happens? You get into noon, here's your afternoon thunderstorm. This is when people are getting hit by lightning. Again, we want to focus down here. This is where it's safe. All right, so what do you look for when you're out hiking, right? Okay, we're going to look at just a progression of clouds. Bluebird day, sun comes up, no clouds in the sky. Man, this looks good, right? Green light, go. Boom. Then as the day starts to build, probably starts getting in the mid to late morning, you start seeing these puffy kind of cotton ball clouds start to form. You know, nothing threatening yet, but you need to be aware of it. You know, this is nothing. This is like, oh, clouds are starting to form. And then as these clouds start to build up and get bigger, we start to see this growth. They start to get taller, right? And the bottoms of the clouds get black, and now you're in a thunderstorm situation, okay? So this means like things are good, let's keep going. This means like we're okay for now, We're going to keep an eye on it. This means like hopefully you're almost back to the car, you're heading down. You do not want to keep going up in this situation. Some mornings it'll be like this all day. Some mornings, a couple hours will go by and it'll go boom, boom, and you'll be getting hit with a thunderstorm at 10 a.m. That's kind of what you want to think about. You always just want to be aware of what's happening. You know, a lot of times people get caught in storms and they're like, it just came out of nowhere. Well, usually there are indications that it's building, but you got to be watching for them. The other thing to consider is if you're climbing up a mountain and you're facing one direction the whole way, you might not be able to see what the clouds are doing on the other side. So it may be sunny above you and behind you, but out across from you, there may be something brewing that you can't see. So it's often a good idea as you're going up, people are going to be coming down, ask them, say, hey, what's the weather look like on the other side? Are we good? And people will be like, oh yeah, everything's great. Or I've had times where we've seen something like this and I'll be warning people, say, just so you know, something's building on the other side. Just be aware of it. Let's talk about a little bit of etiquette here. Let's talk about rocks. Look at these nasty, nasty rock gullies. These are technically class 2 sections, and they're some of the most terrifying parts of 14ers, in my opinion. I would much rather be on a class 3-4 rock here. So over here on Mount Lindsay, again, nasty, loose gully. Sometimes you can get up and climb here in this class 3 and stay out of this. Same thing on Pyramid. It's really important that any time that you see a rock coming down a gully or down the mountain, you yell, rock! You don't know who might be 100, 200 feet below you, okay? And if you see a rock go by, it doesn't matter who kicked it. It doesn't matter. You yell out so people know. And then sometimes you'll get in these gullies and there'll be people and you'll hear, rock, rock, rock. And then you'll see the rock go by. Like, people need a heads up, because if you're standing there with your head down and you look up and there's a rock coming at your head, it's going to be bad. So we all have a responsibility to be as careful as we can, to be like a cat, real light-footed, not to kick things down, but you will over time. And when you do, yell out rock, keep people safe. Also, this little guy over here, the mountain goat, they look sweet, they look cute. They will kick rocks down on you every once in a while, especially on the harder peaks. I had one on Pyramid where there was a little mountain goat family, was like, I don't know, 100 feet above me, and I get across this gully, and all of a sudden, I hear, and my buddies are yelling, rock, and I like jump out of the way, and they're like, those goats tried to kill you. Like, one of the goats actually just started stomping and pushed rocks down on me. So keep an eye on these guys. They look really cute, but they might be trying to take you out. All right, so here's, if you want to practice yelling rock, you know, rock. Hopefully nothing that big. Rock. Okay, let's keep going here. So one of the things I want to talk about is kind of like your progression in climbing and learning. You know, so you may, if you start off with class 1 and 2 peaks, you might not think, oh, these are the most exciting, but they can be very exciting. When you're climbing these basic peaks, you're learning a lot. You're learning about how to plan your trip, how to use the resources on 14ers.com. You're watching the weather. You're learning how your body reacts to elevation, altitude sickness. You're learning, you know, what your strength is, how far you can hike. You're learning about what foods work for you and don't work for you. You're getting an idea of how much water to drink. Those are all things you're going to need for every 14er you ever climb. And you can learn them for the very first time you go out. Then when you get into the harder peaks, the intermediate peaks, the harder class 2s and the class 3s, you know, you start doing more detailed trip planning. It's not as easy as park the car and follow the people all the way to the top. Route finding, you may have to follow some cairns. You may have to look at the map, figure out where you are, use some GPS. You're going to get in some of these nastier loose gullies and loose rocks. You may do some technical climbing. You're going to start to figure out who your friends are and who you want to be on a mountain with, and more importantly, who you don't want to be on a mountain with. And you might have some really long days. I mean, you can have 12, 14-hour days if you start doing some of these really big, long peaks. By the time you get to the class 4 peaks, this is when you're going to start being tested for all of these things. And what happens is, if people are inexperienced and they just go do capital as their first peak, they're out there and they haven't learned these basic skills yet. You know, they don't understand the weather, they don't understand their body, they don't know what they're doing. And so all these skills that you should be learning here are deadly when you get down here. You know, you can make some mistakes on Bierstadt. You can learn and you'll be okay. But if you make those mistakes on the harder peaks, they can get you into some real trouble. Okay, so what do you do when you get into real trouble? Well, the easiest thing to do if you have a signal is to pull out your phone, and you can either call the sheriff. Bill Middlebrook has the sheriff and search and rescue at the top of every route description. But probably the easiest thing to do is just call 911. Tell them, hey, I'm on Gray's Peak. Here's what happens. They're going to alert the search and rescue. There are also a couple of devices. Spot makes a spot tracker, and Garmin now makes now bought the InReach. These are devices that you pay for the device and then you pay a monthly subscription, but they allow you to do a couple things. Number one, this can track you. So you can set up a website and a loved one at home can keep an eye on you and see where you're going. For the InReach, you can actually hook up your cell phone and send basically satellite text messages. So you can get a message out anywhere you go. They're expensive, but they're really worth it. They also have the SOS button on it where you press the button and you're saying, me or someone here is hurt, we need help right away. And that's where they're really worth their money. Now, the problem people make is they buy one of these and they think, oh, I got the free helicopter ride button here, I can go do whatever I want. That's not what they're for. You know, they're for, you need to make good decisions, but when you get into trouble, this is a good way to call for help. So if you do have to call for help, which I hope you never have to, but if you do, let's talk a little bit about helicopters here. So there's two ways that you can basically be rescued. The first one is search and rescue. Each county has their own search and rescue. It's made up of volunteers. They can hike in, find you, carry you off on a stretcher. If it's more severe, they might send in a helicopter. The two types of helicopters you might encounter are the Flight for Life, or you could actually get a military helicopter from the Colorado National Guard. Flight for Lives are fast, but they're also limited in where they can land and where they can go. They're really designed for, car accidents on the highway in remote places, landing on the highway, picking people up, flying them back to the highway. They can get up into the mountains if there are places to land. If you're really lucky, search and rescue can call the Colorado National Guard. This is the high altitude, what does HAT stand for? High altitude airing aviation training sites. And these guys are full-blown military and mostly Black Hawks, sometimes Chinooks. And they will use rescues as a training mission to come find you. And if you're going to get rescued, that is the way to go. And so I have here let's see here, we got a YouTube video. This is on the Maroon Bells. This is North Maroon. And this is a helicopter rescue coming in. Now what's going on here is these guys in the red, they are the search and rescuers. They have hiked up and found, we have one injured climber here and his partner. So they found them, they determined that they need a helicopter evacuation. They've called in the National Guard. National Guard is showing up in their Black Hawk, and we can watch the rescue here. This is the wounded, injured climber. And there's Maroon Lake, where everybody takes the photos with the bells. Okay, so let's go back to my slide. Boom. All right, so if you're going to get, plucked off a mountain, that's the way to do it. The important thing to remember, though, is that it can take a long time to summon a helicopter. One of my close friends was on Creststone Peak. They had someone who they thought broke their ankle. They pressed the spot button, and it took like 8 hours for the helicopter to show up. They got in trouble, or the climber got injured probably right around noon, and it was right at sunset that the helicopter showed up. So it's not instant. It's not like being in the city and calling 911 and an ambulance shows up in 10 minutes. This is you could be out there a while, so you need to prepare for that. And that's a situation where like an emergency bivvy and extra food and those kind of things are really important. So one thing is there is what's called a Corsair card, which is Colorado Outdoor Recreation Search and Rescue card. If you've purchased a hunting or fishing license, you'll notice there's a little fee on there that's like, I got mine. It's like a 25-cent, or maybe it's $1, it's something like that. It goes into this fund, and basically what happens is if a search and rescue comes and finds you or looks for you, they can get reimbursed for their expenses from this fund. If you don't have a hunting or fishing license, you can also purchase one, or you can purchase a Corsair card. It's $3 a year, or you can buy, it was like 5 years for 12 bucks. You can find these online. And basically what happens is you sign up, you just put in this basic information, you buy it, and your money is now part of the pool. And so if something happens, the people who come and save you can get reimbursed for it. There is not a charge to you to call search and rescue if it's a legitimate injury or situation. A lot of times people are afraid, they get in a bad situation and they think, oh, I can't afford to call a helicopter, so they don't do anything, and then they get in a worse situation. You will not be charged if you're injured or need a rescue to call a helicopter. So please use it if you need it, and get a Corsair card so that people who help you can get reimbursed for their efforts. All right, one of the last things I want to talk about is when you go on your trip, tell people where you are. Okay, here's a story that happens over and over again, right? Someone goes for a hike, they don't tell anybody they're leaving, they're gone for a day, then another day goes by and people are like, where's this guy? And then they're like, oh, I think he went for a hike. Well, where did he go? I don't know. He was somewhere out by Buena Vista. There's like 4 or 5 14ers out there. Then, 3 days later, they start the search. That's not good. So what you want to do is you want to tell people where you're going to be. And so this is what you need to contain: the when, where, who, and what your plan is, right? So you want to tell somebody, hey, I'm going to go, this is a little outdated, I'm going to go hike Mount Bierstadt on Wednesday. This is the date. This is the route I'm using, okay? These are my friends. This is where we're going to be. Here's our plan. We're going to start at 6 a.m. from Grinnell. We're going to get to the summit. We should be back at the car around this time, and then action. If you haven't heard from me by 7 p.m., actually, this should be the same day. I messed that up. But if you haven't heard from me by 7 p.m., call the sheriff. Call this number and tell them I'm missing. Because here's what's going to happen, okay? That phone call is going to go out. The sheriff's going to send somebody to the trailhead. They're going to drive there, and they're going to see if your car is there. So you also want to include your car information. If your vehicle is there, they know you're somewhere on the mountain. If your vehicle is not there, they know that you're down getting pizza at Bojo's or some other place. And so what happens is in that 2 to 3 days, it's really critical. If you get hurt and you break your ankle and you need a rescue, you want people to start the search. You don't want a day to go by, and you don't want the next day to be people going, well, was he on this mountain or this mountain? You want to be like, hey, look, I'm not back by 7 p.m. The next morning, there's going to be a fully mobilized crew. They're going to know exactly what your plan was. They're going to go right up the route that you were at, and there's a good chance of rescuing you. If you don't do this and people have to start from scratch, you're just wasting time. Your chances of getting rescued and surviving are going to go way down. We talked a little bit about leave no trace principles. A couple of things we want to think about is, you can bring your dog on hikes. For the easier one or two, class 1 or class 2 hikes, good place to bring your dog. The intermediate peaks get really hard, and then the hardest peaks, in my opinion, you shouldn't have your dog up. But make sure and follow our rules. Keep your dog on leash. A lot of the animals that run around, like the pikas and the marmots, they only have a few months in the summer, and they have to gather up all their food and save it for winter. So if every 5 minutes someone's dog's chasing them around, it really stresses them out and could actually cause them to not survive the winter. Don't pick wildflowers. Anytime you pick, these hikes can have beautiful flowers, especially in the middle of the summer. Every time you pick them, you're killing the wildflowers. They're not able to seed for next year. So take photos, but don't kill them. And then stay on trail. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning. This is more about trail etiquette. I want to put in a plug for a group called the Colorado 14er Initiative. We volunteer with them every year. They do trail projects. This is kind of what can happen when a trail gets torn up, right? People start walking in one part of it, and then then they move over and, oh, this is nice tundra, we can keep walking, and then that gets kind of tore up, and the trails can become wider and wider and wider. We really want to avoid this. The tundra, these little grasses and shrubs can take hundreds of years to regrow, and so once they die, they're not going to just pop up in a couple of years. So we really want to be careful about staying on the trail, avoiding these kind of things from happening. So anyway, that's kind of the end of my talk. All these beautiful photos in it were taken by Cameron Miller, good friend of mine, professional photographer. He has a lot of awesome 14er photography on his website. Some of the videos that I didn't get a chance to show because of time, but I will link to them down below, were taken by Britt Jones. And he has, Britt's made a lot of videos in the Steve Gladback Memorial Series that really talk about, again, trip planning, how to stay safe, 10 essentials, etc. So I will link to those for you guys. A couple of things I want to talk about is normally before, the era of the global pandemic, we would have a monthly happy hour. And Denver has been going strong for over a decade. Boulder has happy hours. Colorado Springs has a good happy hour. These are people, who, like you and I, who really enjoy getting out, who really enjoy climbing, and they get together at a local brewery and they're, somewhere in the Front Range and hang out. And this is a great place to meet people and to meet other climbers, to get information, to find partners. Right now, because of the COVID situation, everything is on hold. But as hopefully things start to improve, we're going to get back to 14er happy hours again. So come hang out with us. Like I said, before COVID, I would go to almost every single Denver happy hour. Sometimes I get up to Boulder, and the Colorado Springs has a good turnout too. There are also a series of events. So each year, in a normal year, we do the Fall Gathering, which is where people get together, go down to Lake City, kind of around Red Cloud, Sunshine, Handies, camp for 2 or 3 days. It's kind of a group gathering where people go camp together and then make friends, go hike some 14ers, come back, hang out. Right now, that has been postponed, but we're going to kind of play it by ear. We might actually do some type of socially distanced thing. But hopefully next year we'll be back at it. There is the winter welcomer, usually happens around Halloween, and that's a hike done by Britt Jones, who I just mentioned. That one is a hike up Quandary, usually at the end of October. So it's getting cold. It's winter-like conditions. It's not winter. For a lot of years, we had a January Quandary event where in January, a group of people will go hike. And then there's a spring gathering that takes place. And then there's a summer Colorado 14er Initiative trip. So we used to have a packed full calendar of a lot of get-togethers, from a monthly happy hour to getting out and climbing. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now, but someday we're going to get back and do all those things. So check the forum and check the Facebook group, and that should keep you aware of all that. So anyway, thank you very much for watching my talk. I'm really excited to share it with everybody. I am Nick Januchis. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm known as Mongoose is my username on 14ers.com. Feel free to shoot me a message or ask me any questions. And this is the segment of the talk where normally I would take questions from the audience and we'd have a little bit of a talk and discussion. But what I think I'm going to do now is, if you have a question, feel free to send it to me on YouTube or Facebook, Instagram. And if I get enough questions, if I get one or two, I'll just answer them in the comments. But if I get a lot of questions, I'll put together another maybe a short video, or maybe we'll do a round robin, and I'll go through and answer all your questions. So anyway, I just appreciate you guys. If you made it this far, if you made it all the way through this hike, excuse me, if you made it all the way through this talk, I think you're ready to go hike. I hope you guys have just a great time in the mountains. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and stay safe, you know. So thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for watching. And hopefully I'll see you out on the trail or talk to you soon.